Well, welcome back, everyone. My topic is following in the order of identity, and my topic is to talk to you today about what it means to be a princess. What does it mean to be a princess? I decided to start with definition because sometimes we corrupt words because of the way we use them. The word princess means a daughter or granddaughter of a king. It means royalty. It also means that the princess represents the kingdom first. They are the official representative of a nation, just like an ambassador is. See, one of my dad's favorite sayings was, "Remember the daughter of who you are." I called my mom last night and I asked her about it, and she said, "I've never heard that before." I thought, oh, okay, I guess you're not his daughter, so he didn't have to tell you that. But I heard that constantly. Anytime you're going somewhere, he would remind us, remember whose child you are. See, my dad was a judge. And because he was a judge, he felt as though he wanted his children to represent him in a certain way because of his position, not just in the church, but on the bench as well. So it was a constant reminder. And whole time growing up, I would always think, what would my dad think? What would my dad say? So it was instilled in me from a very young age about how to behave. So it is with great pleasure that I've come today to just share with you some of the insights that God gave me about the topic of being a princess. I read a quote that came to my mind. I actually looked it up this morning. Where does that quote come from? And I was surprised. It was actually a quote attributed to Miles Monroe, whose book I actually used in preparation of this topic. And the quotation said, "When the purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable." When you don't know the purpose of something, you use it for something wrong. When you don't know the purpose of a wife, you abuse the wife. When you don't know the purpose of a book, you abuse the book. Anything you do not know the purpose of, abuse becomes inevitable. In line of that, we have to know, what is the purpose of man? How do we know what our purpose is as human beings? We have to go back to the manufacturer, who is God himself. So why on earth did God bring us here? Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the cattle, over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." So let's go back to that word. I like the New American Standard Bible, so that's where I quoted from. So it talks about rulership is what we're created for. In King James, it talks, that same word of rulership is used as dominion. Dominion includes to rule, to have sovereignty, or to reign. So that brings us to why were we created? We're created to be rulers. We're created to be over something. In his book called Rediscovering the Kingdom, Miles Monroe said that to be given dominion means to be established as a sovereign kingdom or rule, as a master, governor, responsible for reigning over a designated territory with the inherent authority to represent and embody as a symbol. We all know that Jesus is the King of Kings, right? Have you ever thought about that? What does that mean? In the last week, I've thought about that a lot. King of Kings. He's the king over kings. So who are the kings that he's over? How about that being you and I? He's our king, right? But we're also kings because we have rulership. We have authority that God has himself given to us. In Exodus 19:5-6, it says, "Now then, If you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. We're spiritual Israelites as children of God, so these words apply to us. The intent of the original kingdom that God created gave us rulership. His desire was to manifest his glorious character, wisdom, and purposes in the earth's realm through the administrative leadership of mankind. What is the greatest crime that someone can commit in a country? It's called treason. What is treason? It means a crime that betrays one country, especially by attempting to kill or overthrow the government. So anything you do that doesn't give allegiance to the government of a nation is called treason. When we think about the fall of Adam, most of us think of it as the sin of disobedience, right? It was more than that. It was treason. What he did was he took the dominion, the power that God gave to him, and he let go of it. He committed treason. And because he committed treason, Jesus had to come in order to gain the kingdom back for us. Make sense? That's what it means when we talk about people being born again. See, we have a first birth through Adam. That's the physical nature. Now, in order to be restored back to the original manufactural standards of God, we need to be born again. Being born again means a rebirth. And what it does is it puts us back into the sonship that God originally gave to us that Adam gave away. So when we become born again, we get restored to us that kingship, that daughtership, that sonship that God originally intended for us to have in the first place. Now, once we're born again, we become His. See, I loved how God works things out. I'm sitting here watching Shirley earlier, and I'm thinking, why would they start out with an extrovert and then bring an introvert afterwards? That's painful. And yes, Shirley, I really do love you, even though I don't externally express it. I love you and I appreciate you, and I love all the sanguines in my life because they bring a dimension to my life that
Not good for diets, though.
that I am not able to express. I get that quite a bit. People say, oh, she didn't look at me, she didn't greet me, she didn't hug me. People come to me all the time, did I hurt you? Is there something that I said or did to you? And I'm still like, not today. But in reality, they haven't done anything. I live in my own world for the most part. And so when I have this serious look, so someone thinks, oh, well, maybe I offended her. I promise you, my life has so much going on. Most of it doesn't have anything to do with you. Nothing to do with you. So let's just put that out there right now. I hope I don't have to share that again. But Shelley talked a lot about some of the benefits that we have by being the child of God. We have the benefit of reconciliation. We have the benefit of access to our King. We have the benefit of healing. There's so many benefits, and we love that. We talk about that. We sing about that all day long, but I'm going to share the second half of that benefit with us today, and that's the responsibility. There is a responsibility that comes with having rights. There are no rights without responsibilities. So what are our responsibilities as being a princess, the responsibility of being a child of God? See, we have this void in us that can only be filled by God. Some people call it the God-sized void that only He can fulfill within us. And so we go on this quest to fill that up. And most of the world fill it with two things. One is religion. The second thing is idols. But God made that void to be filled with relationship. That is the only way we can get to him, is through relationship. Galatians 4:7 says, "Therefore you are no longer a slave, but you are now a son, and you are also an heir through God." In 1 John 3, verse 3, "See how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, that we are to be called the children of God. And such we are. For this reason the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him as he is." What are the responsibilities that we have? And number one responsibility as an ambassador is that we have no opinion. I'll say that again. We have no opinion. One of the things, I think the downfalls of social media is everybody has an opinion. If I say it's red, somebody has to let me know it's green. If I say I like apples, somebody says, "Why don't you like oranges?" We have no opinions as children of God. The only opinion we should have is his opinion. I read a post that really grieved me about 2 weeks ago. And it grieved me not because of the content of it, but because of the person who said it. And I said, what would Jesus do? Because they're hailing this person who has evil intent. And they're like, "Oh no, Moren, you really need to watch the whole video. Watch the whole thing, and I promise you, you'll agree." I can't watch the whole thing because I don't pollute my mind with certain things. Some things are just unbecoming of a child of God. And if you're a princess, you should know that. The problem is most of us don't even think of ourselves as royalty. We don't see ourselves as God sees us. We see ourselves as flawed, as opposed to seeing ourselves as complete in him. So we take on the position of servants. We become slaves to things. We create these idols in our lives that rule over us, whereas we already have a king that we owe all our allegiance to. The only one that we need to serve, the only one we need to bow to. I hear people all the time talking about, "Oh, that habit or that thing is bigger than me." No, it's not. That thing only has the authority that you give to it. When you take your authority back, the authority that God has already given back to us, you'll overcome that thing. What will Jesus do? We need to ask ourselves that question more often than we do. But I think, no opinion. No opinion. When you look at what is going on in the country today, all the riots, all the innuendos, all the, yes, our history is important, no, our history is not important, we need to erase some history, why are we even involved in those conversations? Shouldn't we be the ones that create reconciliation? What would Jesus do? I shared several times over the last 2 weeks the story of the Good Samaritan. So many of us look at the man who was injured and would say, well, why was he flaunting his goods? If he wasn't flaunting his goods, he would never have been attacked and robbed. What time of the day was he traveling? Did he travel at night or during the day? In other words, did he bring this upon himself? We ask the question, Why was he traveling by himself? Don't you know you should have somebody with you so that way if somebody tries to attack you, they can help you? Why was he on his own? Did Jesus ask any of those questions? When a woman is raped, we ask the question, what was she wearing? Why was she over there by herself? Are those the questions that Jesus would ask? If they are not, those are questions we shouldn't be asking either. What did Jesus say? Who did Jesus say was his neighbor? The one that stopped to help him. And then he gave us a mandate. He said, go and do the same. Go and do the same. Is that what you're doing? Is that what I'm doing? Will your social media page show that that's what you're doing about his business? Or do you have your own opinion that overrides that of Christ? Those are the sobering questions that we need to ask, not only as followers of Jesus, but as princesses, as kinship, as royalty, because we represent what he represents. Ambassadors take on the identity of the kingdom that they represent. When you go to the United Nations, you can tell who the Africans are by what they're wearing, by the way they carry themselves. You can tell who the Americans are because of the way they carry themselves, because of the way they work and what they're wearing. Can someone look at you and know your identity? Do people feel comfortable cursing around you? I remember a friend of mine, Karen, recently, she took a picture with Mary Kelso and I, and she posted and she said, these are my two mentors. She said, can you tell that I even sit up straighter because I'm between them? Oh. Something about us as princesses needs to dictate a difference in our lives. Something about us needs to be able to draw people to us who are like-minded. Something about us needs to repel certain people from us because they will not be comfortable when they're around us. They can't be who they are. They can't say the things they say. They can't use the language that they normally use. Why? Because there's a princess in the room. Do you really see yourself as that princess that God has ordained you to be? Do you act that way? Do you carry yourself that way? Why is everybody comfortable to come and just share any nonsense with you? Why are you comfortable sharing the nonsense that somebody else has imparted upon you? We need to do better. One of the most humbling things that I've read about Mahatma Gandhi was a quote that he has about Christianity. He said, these Christians that I know are nothing like the Christ. Did you hear that? This is a man that led a revolution. How much more could he have? Because he read the writings of Christ and he identified with it. But he could not identify with the Christians, so he rejected Christ because of Christians. Did you hear that? Who are Christians? Little Christs, followers of Christ. Are they really following him when someone would reject him because of our actions? What are you doing in your life that's causing people to reject Christ? What am I doing in mine that caused them to reject him? What am I doing that does not reflect him? I said to someone once, long time ago, and I asked him, I said, you are doing so much for the kingdom of God, but how would you feel if because of you, one person ended up in hell? Have you thought about that in your actions? Yes, we can bring hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to Christ by some of the things that we do. But would that make up for one person going to hell because of what you did? Questions that we need to ponder and think about what we do. Sometimes, because you are a princess, you forget about your right to something because it can become a stumbling block to another person. So you give up your right because you have a responsibility that's greater than your right. I look at Queen Esther in the Bible. She was both humble and obedient. She took on the persona of the palace, so much so that even her husband, the king, did not know she was an Israelite. That's what an ambassador does. You take on the persona of the kingdom that you represent. You look like the kingdom, you act like the kingdom, you talk like the kingdom, you become the kingdom. That's Esther. Who did she replace? Vashti. Why? Because the king said, come, let me show my wife off. And she said, no, I don't have time for you right now. What did the king say? He said, if I let her get away with that, she becomes an ambassador for this country. And all the women, we think it's okay for them to do what she did. She will become an ambassador. Everything we do is representative of who we are and whose we are. I never saw that until, I read the whole book of Esther again when I was preparing for this, and I thought, wow, Vashti was an ambassador too. And that's why she was removed, because she represented things that were not in congruence with the kingdom that she was supposed to represent. And so God took somebody else who was not one of those people and made that person, because of her humility and because she became humble, because she blended into the kingdom that she now represented as queen, she was able to cause the redemption of the people of God. She didn't do things for her own self. She didn't eat what she wanted to eat. She didn't go where she wanted to go. She even went before the king when it looked like she may have been killed for doing it. So she put her own life on the line in order to represent the people that God had called her to be an ambassador for. Are you doing that today? In what way are you applying those same principles that we are here to represent? See, a princess looks like her father. She takes on the demeanor and the attitude of her father. And she does things, not what she wants anymore, but she does the things that her father has called her to do. Last Sunday, Pastor Galen said, that was a great sermon last Sunday. I was like, whoa. He made certain comments that just kind of blew me away. And one of them was that the biggest thing that stands between the church and reaching the world is reputation. The biggest thing is reputation. Do you all remember that commercial? It's a cereal commercial where there's this woman eating the cereal and she became a little girl. And then there was this older woman. See, older kind of looks different than it used to look to me. Yeah, because I look at that age now and I'm going, that's about my age, so that's not older anymore. So we'll just call her not as young as she used to be woman. And she's over there and she goes, the waitress comes to her and says, what would you like to have? And she said, whatever she's having, that's what I want to have. Do you remember that commercial? We should be walking billboards of that commercial where people say, Sandy, there's something different about you. What is it? And then your response would be, Jesus. Come know him. Deborah, I saw something that you did the other day. Why did you do that? And you say, Jesus. Would you like to know him? That's who God made us to be as ambassadors of him. We take on his reputation. We take on his persona. We have no opinion. But I think, And I know that it's a war within us. I fight that war. Because I have this saying that I don't think any of you have come close enough to in this room to get to hear that. And that saying is, if that person tries me one more time, I'm going to show them that Jesus is not through with me yet. Yeah, you've been nice, so none of you have ever heard me say that. isn't that what shows that enmity that's between the flesh and the spirit? And we have to sometimes remind ourselves that we are born again, that we are under the blood, and that we are ambassadors. Remind yourself that and surround yourself with people who will remind you of that. I have friends that I can call that will call me to the plate and say, okay, Moren, you can't do that. You better not do that. Or if you even try that, I'm coming to your house tonight. We should have friends like that that can call us to the plate and say that. If you don't have friends like that, you'll never become the ambassador that God has called you to be. You've got to have people in your life that can tell you the truth about who you are and who you should be. It is because we do not reflect the kingdom that we have so much brokenness in the world today. See, the church needs to be the one that stands forth and steps out there and leads this generation to Christ. Instead, we have become followers. We have become idol worshippers. We take our flags and we raise it above the cross. It ought not be so. That's idolatry. That's idol. Well, the flag needs, no, the cross needs to be reign supreme. Should you be proud of your country? Absolutely. Should you be in a place where you should die for your country if need so? Absolutely. But what comes above country? Jesus. Jesus. If there's a conflict between Jesus and my country, Jesus. A conflict between Jesus and my opinion, Jesus. A conflict between Jesus and anything, Jesus. I'm amazed at how many texts I have to send to my friends on Facebook and say, the thing you just said about that person, can you now lead them to Christ? That is the question I started asking people. And the answer every time but once has been, no, I'm going to remove it right now. When we talk about our politics in such an ugly way that we would take a human being that Christ died for and put their picture up and talk about all this ugliness about this person, can you now go to that person and talk to them about being an ambassador of the King? If the answer is no, you should not post that. What is it in your life that does not represent Christ today? That is a thing that belongs to a slave, and you're not slaves anymore. You're a princess. There are certain attitudes and certain language and certain words that do not fall in line with a princess. Stop it. Stop it. The cross has got to come first. You always ask the question, what will Jesus do? And I said all but one earlier because somebody I go to church with posted something and I asked her that question. She said, well, I also know what I posted is not true, but it could be true because they're capable of saying it. They may be capable of saying it. But your opinion, once it comes above that of the king, you're no longer a princess. You have reduced yourself back to slavery. And she refused to do anything about it and wanted to have a conversation with me online about it. And I said, I'm not doing that because it's unbecoming of the princess that I am to have this drag-out, knockout fight with you in public. If you want to have a decent conversation, come offline. Let's have it. She said, no, I want everybody to see you for who you are. She wanted me to show that side of me that God's not through with. I'm not ready to put that on display. It exists. Don't get me wrong. It's there. And if you want to find out, just there are certain things you can do to see that side. But I promise you, you don't want to see that side. And so I did what everybody should know how to do. I found that button on Facebook that says block, and I hit it. Because I will not, especially in public, especially when my mind is right, do something that does not represent me as who I am. Because what I'm saying is that the death of Christ was not enough to redeem me, and I promise you it was. So I will not lower myself to that level. Instead, I would rise and walk as the princess that I am. When we think about who we represent, we need to forget the things that have happened to us or things that have been done to us. What do I mean by that? Shirley talked earlier about how molestation affected her, how abuse affected her. And to some degree, every one of us has been abused. Some with the abuser being intentional, some abuse that was not even intentional. It just happened to be a byproduct of brokenness that we live in this world. But as his children, we rise above that. As his children, we walk in our own healing. We go out and do the work on ourselves so that those things no longer control us like they used to. Many of you know my testimony. Today I stand before you weighing less than 200 pounds less than my highest weight. You heard me right. I was knocking on 400 pounds when I finally came to my senses. And I did not get to the size I am now until I was in a coaching session. And I realized that this thing is standing between God and I. It's standing between my testimony. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I was already 50 years old. And at that age, the hormones are raging and all kinds of things are happening to my body. And I'm going, what is going on? I had 1,200 calories and look at the scale. But I decided that I'm going to give that to Jesus and I'm going to let him help me and heal that brokenness in me that created the need for me to have that covering. We can do it. Our brokenness is all different. If we go around this room, everybody will tell me a different story about what their brokenness is. But it doesn't matter what it is. As a child of God, he has given us the authority to overcome it. And we can get over all forms of idolatry that is in our life, because that is what it had become in my own life, was idolatry. One of the most painful scriptures is Matthew 7:22. And it says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name we performed many miracles? And what was his answer? I have not known you. How do we perform miracles and prophesy? Belief. It says, these signs will follow those who believe. Do you know that the demons believe and they even tremble? So belief is not enough for salvation. Belief is not enough for salvation. What creates salvation? Lordship. We put so much emphasis on belief. That's not salvation. The demons believe, but the demons are not saved. Lordship, kingship, that's what salvation is about. So whenever we take other things and we put them as Lord over the cross, what we're really saying is the blood of Jesus is not enough. And that's why Jesus said, you never knew me. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I pray that none of us get to hear that. But it's in our own hands whether we hear that or not. It's in our own actions whether we hear that or not. Now let's look at this very obscure scripture, and I call it obscure because I'm going, where did that come from? Matthew chapter 23, and I'm only going to read verse 13 and 15. It says, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut up the kingdom of heaven from people, for you do not enter in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in." So it's saying you're standing in the way of other people coming to know me. You're an anti-ambassador. You're not representing me, and because of that, people don't get to know me. Can you imagine us saying I'm a Christian, us saying I'm a follower of Christ, us saying that I know this king, but then he's saying, no, you are not only not coming in, but you have now become a stumbling block for others to come in. And then it goes on in verse 15 and says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are." That's Jesus talking. That not only are you a stumbling block for people coming in, but even the ones you're able to overcome and bring into the kingdom, you make them worse than they were before they came into the kingdom. Yikes. What are we doing in our lives that's creating a stumbling block to others? What are we doing in our lives where we cannot say, "Walk where I walk"? What is, I was talking to someone a couple of years ago about what is it to be an elder? I asked the question, I said, what exactly is an elder? And the answer was, oh, anybody that can say, "Walk like I walk." If someone can say, "Walk like I walk," that's all it is. But guess what? Isn't that what we're all called to as Christians? You don't have to have a title other than that princess title, that ambassador title, that kingship title, in order to say, you just do what I do. Someone says, "So how do I get to be a Christian?" You say, "Oh, follow me." "Oh, just do what I do. Say what I say. If I go this way, you go this way. If I go that way, you go that way. If I bend down, you bend down." How many of us can say that? That's the mandate that we have as princesses. Just come with me and do what I do. Watch me. I remember the biggest challenge I ever had as a human being. I have this goddaughter that I just love like she was my own. And one day we're sitting in their living room, and she took her purse and went like this and started going around. Her mom said, "What are you doing?" "I'm doing like Auntie Moren." And that scared me. That scared me. I said, oh my goodness, she's watching me. She wants to be like me when she grows up. That's a scary thought. It straightened me up. You know what else straightened me up as a youth leader? All these youth under me. And I had I think the 15, 16-year-olds. And the first few were about to get their learner's permit. And they're in class, and they said, "Miss Moren, do you speed?" Well, we had a pact. You will never lie to me, and I will never lie to you. The moment I catch you in one lie, everything you've ever said to me, I'm going to tell your parents, and I'm going to tell the pastor. And we shared everything. Things mama shouldn't know, things papa better not know, and things pastor better not hear about, we talked about. And they asked that question, and I'm standing there in front of the people that I have vowed to never to lie to. And they said, "Miss Moren, do you speed?" And I said, "Oh God, please help me right now." And he did. Holy Spirit will help you if you really want his help. And you know what my answer was? Not anymore. Not anymore. So every time I see that speedometer, I say, "Moren, not anymore." more. We need to be careful. See, this life is not about our own anymore. When we get saved, why is it that God doesn't just say, this is the purest you'll ever be, and just take you home right there and then? That would just be the best thing ever. Because the moment you give your life, you're the cleanest you probably ever will be. Why doesn't he take us home? One reason: go reconcile the others to me. So if we're not acting like the princess that we're supposed to be, are we really doing the only job that he has given us? The only mandate that we have from him: go reconcile others to me. That's it. That's all the Great Commission is all about. We can quote all the scriptures we want, but that's one thing that it's about. Go reconcile others to me. So what is it that's in your life today that's not reconciling others? Or even worse, what is it in your life today that's a stumbling block where people will go, she's a Christian, I'd rather go to hell? Many of you have seen that poster of the lady on Facebook that talks about how she's going to split hell wide open. And then the comments that I see Christians putting on there makes me embarrassed to be identified with these people. And guess what? I go to church with some of them. I can't even say, what is your pastor telling you? Because I know what my eyes is telling us, and he's not telling us to do anything like that. So Jesus said, not only are you a stumbling block, but then there's some of you that will bring them in, and you will corrupt them so much that they are worse off for knowing you than before they met you. What is it in your life that makes you feel less than the princess that you are, that's causing you to act like that slave? It's time to confront those things. It's time to ask for help. It's time to get some mentors around you to help you to overcome that thing, so that everything about us will say, I am a follower of Christ. I am a princess. Because that's exactly who you are. That's exactly who you are. You are the daughter of the King of Kings. You are a princess. You are an ambassador for him. So let's go out and let's start doing everything that we need to do to form an alignment with him. And that starts from knowing his word. We can't follow rules we don't know. If you don't know what the law is, you're going to break it. If you don't know what your purpose is, you're going to abuse your purpose. So we need to fall in line with our King and become the ambassadors that he has called us to be. Amen? Amen. I'll take any questions you may have at this point. Or comments.
Moren, what age were you when your mind switched from I am the daughter of your earthly father, the judge, to really understanding that even greater than that, you are the daughter of the King of Kings?
Being my father's daughter came at a very early age. I had a wonderful father. I know a lot of people can't say that, but my father was so good that he spoiled all his daughters for every man out there. He really did. None of us could find anybody close to who he was. So he was a wonderful man. I even remember one time my mom said to me, I was in my 40s at that point, she said, Moren, I know you're trying to find a man like your dad. You're never going to. So what you need to do is find something as close as you can and just shut your mouth and live with it. I said, Mom, I can't. God gave you him. That same God can give me him. And if I can't have that, I'd rather not have anything. That's how good a dad that I had was. My father was known in Nigeria as the incorruptible judge. There was nothing they could do to sway him. And they tried. At his funeral, one of the judges that was sitting there made the comment. He said, now this great man, and I don't want to idolize him to the point of not telling his weakness. I have a half sister where my dad cheated on my mom. And it was such an unbelievable thing. The young woman that he had the affair with was, I think, a couple of years older than my oldest sister. That's how crazy it was. And it was the daughter of somebody he knew. And at his funeral, one of the sitting judges said, if it was not for my half-sister, that there would be people who would build shrines to worship my dad. Because it was like, that was his thing of saying, oh my gosh, he is a human being after all. So my entire life, I idolized him. And even when that happened, and it was such a shock, and it was such a betrayal, not only did he tell my mom, but my mom raised that child. That's the kind of Christian home I grew up in. Because my mom said, the same education, the same opportunities that my children have, your daughter deserves because she did nothing wrong. Bring her home. So even in our brokenness, even in our failures, we don't cover them up. We still come and we put it at the King. When did my mind shift as a Christian? I think that shifts every day because it's layers and layers. Because just when I think I have arrived, just when I think I got it, he says, next, and he shows me something else, and I'm going, that too? I didn't know that was there. I got to work on that now. So it's layers of onions. I don't think any of us will ever arrive. It's layers upon layers. So yes, I've overcome this, and I've overcome this, and I don't have this sin, and I don't have that sin, and I think I'm pure until he shows up again and say, okay, it's time to work on that one. It's time to work on that one. So none of us are at that place where we'd say, I am such an ambassador that I got it. No, you don't. And the moment you think you do, just go on your knees or ask a good friend. They'll tell you. Or better yet, ask your spouse. Yeah, he knows. So it's a continuous walk. It's a continuous walk as we become more and more like him. Mm-hmm. It's quiet. No other questions?
How do you deal with, there's so much anxiety and fear in the world now. You just watch the news.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's, how do you represent being an ambassador and having no opinion, and here you are, a black woman with so many opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking to a lot of my black friends in church and asking them, because I have a daughter who's very opinionated on one side and a son who's very opinionated on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, what's my role? And you said not to have an opinion, but how do you not have an opinion in the times that we're living? Is it hard?
Oh, is it hard? You all should be so grateful for the post I don't get to write. And even more grateful for the ones I write and don't post.
Die to your opinions?
You have to.
Yeah.
I was supposed to do a Facebook Live with someone a few weeks ago. He had called me and said, as a black woman, he was a white man, I want to hear your opinion about these things. I don't have a lot of people I can talk to about this because they won't know where I'm coming from. But I hope you know me well enough to know that I'm not a racist. But I really want an understanding. And we had a very open conversation, and we decided to do a Facebook Live together. And 2 days before that Facebook Live, I called him and I said, I can't do it. He said, why? Because I could not be an ambassador. I had so much hurt and so much pain and so much grief that I wanted to talk about my opinion. I wanted to share how I feel about my wonderful nephews who are great, outstanding men who I fear for every day. The day that they had well, it didn't start out as rioting. It started out as just a demonstration in Nashville, the day that the courthouse was burnt down. As soon as one of my friends texted me and said, this is going on downtown, I was like, where are my nephews? Shagun, where are you? Wale, where are you? What's going on? They're like, we're at home. What's happened? I said, good, stay at home. I have so much fear and anxiety over them, but you know what? Ultimately, they don't belong to me. See, my sister said something to me years ago. My brother-in-law was worried about my nephew and said, I think you need to take him under your wing and teach him real estate and all this stuff. We don't know if he's going to make it through college and blah, 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 and all this. And I was like, does he want to do real estate? I don't know, but I don't think he's going the route we were hoping he would go. So I called my sister. I said, your husband's concerned. What's going on? She said, I'm not concerned. I said, you're not? She said, no, he's not mine. He belongs to God. And whatever it is that God placed in his heart when he created him, that's what I want him to become. My job is to steward him so that he can hear the voice of God. Everything else is not up to me. That's what an ambassador does. That nephew today is a dentist. And yet we had people who feared he wasn't going to go to college. Not only did he finish college, he got his master's and then went to dental school and is a doctor today. Your only job as a parent is to teach those young ones to hear his voice, period. One job, get that right. One job, they hear his voice. Whatever it is that he created them for, he already put that in them. Help them to hear him. So how do I deal with this atmosphere as a black woman? I spend more time on my knees so I can hear him. I try as much as possible to take my own fears, my own anger, my own anything, and try to put it aside. Do I always win? No, I don't. Because I got to read all you all's posts too. So yes, I'm infected by the society that I'm in, but ultimately, I go back to what would he do? How can I be an ambassador for him? How do I carry myself like the princess that I am, regardless of the filth that I'm surrounded by in the world out there? That's what you do as a child of God. God knows there's slavery. God knows there's discrimination. God knows there are people who are being killed that don't deserve it. Not that anybody deserves it. Well, I guess there are people who do. Yeah, there are some who do deserve it because there are things that you can do to lose your rights to life. But regardless of all of that, he still reigns supreme. He's still the judge of the earth, not me, not you. And he hears that cry of every black person, every person who has suffered any kind of injustice, regardless of their color. They still have a king who hears their voice. They still have a king who feels their pain. And ultimately, we need to put ourselves under him and allow him to reign supreme.
He gives us hope.
Yeah. So it's not, I don't represent me anymore. And every time I want to represent me and I remember that, I had to go back and say, I'm sorry, I gave you my word I would do this Facebook Live with you, but I can't because my heart is not in the right place. All people are going to hear is my pain. And I don't want to be the one that shares my pain. What I would rather be is in a position where I can share his pain, where I can share his grief, where I can speak for him. And today, I'm not there. And we need to be very honest with ourselves about those things and say, I'm not there. And it's okay not to be there. It's when we act like we're not where we are, that's when we get in trouble. When we're honest with ourselves and say, I got an issue with that, or I can't handle that, or this is what's really going on, or this is where I am. There's enough grace for all of that. More than enough grace from our Father, so we can still walk as the princess that we are called to be.
When you were growing up, as the daughter of your father, was
angry at you, how did you take his correction, as I say?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He had 5 daughters and 1 son. And everybody would think that that son would be the spoiled one. They were so afraid that he was going to be spoiled that they made sure that he wasn't. And he got it more than any of us did. And as an adult, I can see the ways that he protected me that I did not know was protection. We were called in my mother tongue, eleha. You know the hijab that people wear? In northern Nigeria, mostly northern, part of West also, not only do they have the covering where they wear the hijab, but they also had a face covering where women didn't show their faces. And they called them elehas, and that's what we were called growing up. Now, we didn't have any of the coverings or anything, but because of the way we were so isolated, we had a driver who took us from home and took us to school. And when school was over, the driver took us home. When we didn't have a driver, we had a school bus that we would take, and that's unheard of in Nigeria at that time. It wasn't as prevalent, where you went to a private school that had a school bus that took you home and brought you home. And we went to school, and we went to church, and that was it. We're invited to a party at somebody's house. My dad would say, what are they going to do at the party? They're going to feed you jollof rice, and they're going to give you this, and they're going to have some sodas, and you'll have cake. There's enough of you here to have a party. So go get some cake and have your own party right here. We weren't allowed to go anywhere or do anything. We were so sheltered. And we took it as punishment because all these other kids got to do this, never went camping because we weren't allowed to go camping because he didn't know who those people were. And as an adult, I look back and I say, I know what was happening. I remember my nephew when they were staying with me and he wanted to go spend the night at a friend's house. I said, who's going to be there? Well, my teacher is my friend's mom. Okay, I know them. They go to church. They're good Christians there. Do they have any uncles or aunties or people who hang out in the... I mean, I'm asking all these questions and he's looking at me like, what are you... And then I started realizing that was protection. So yes, we thought he was just the meanest man alive because he was into everything. He asked every question. What did you do? Where did you go? I mean, we're talking the school bus was 5 minutes late. Where did you go after school? Dad, the school bus was late. He would actually call to make sure the school bus... I'm like, you don't believe me? No, it wasn't that he didn't believe me. He wanted to be sure that when you said yes, it's yes. When you said no, it's no. So he was extremely strict about those things. But now we look back on those things and we see exactly why. And we see those things as protection, the same way our Heavenly Father does. You think, oh, he has all these rules. He doesn't want us to have fun. But no, he has all these guides to make sure we don't fall over, to make sure he prevents us from going through certain pains and heartbreaks of life. Yeah, so it was hard growing up in my family. But today I can look back at it and say, wow, the level of protection that we had no idea. And it's the same way with our Heavenly Father. He protects us from so much stuff. Even though we look at those guide rails and we say, prison. No, he's preventing us from being able to topple over to the other side. Yeah. So, coming up, I'm going to have Heather come in and close us out. Thank you very much for your time.